Welcome to Real Talk with the Town, where I sit down with Marana staff to answer your burning questions about our beautiful community. My name is Terry Rozema, and I'm the town manager for the town, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Talk with the Town. My name is Terry, and I am your host, and today we are going to be talking about our beloved Mayor Ed Honea. I'm sure many of you are aware that we lost our beloved mayor just 3 weeks ago today, actually. And we're going to be having a celebration of his life here in just a few days. And I invited a couple of people into the studio here to talk about the mayor. We've been getting a lot of emails and messages, people commenting about the mayor and talking about him and their experience and interaction with him. And so I thought it would be good to just kind of talk through some of that, to celebrate him, to memorialize him, to really remember the legacy that is Mayor Ed Honea. And today I have with me here in the studio, I have Lisa Shafer, and Lisa's going to talk about here in just a minute about how she kind of got to know Mayor Ed Honea. And I have, and Lisa is our Community and Neighborhood Services Director. And then I have his very good friend, Brian Keeley, who works with the Northwest Fire. And Brian took the mayor to lunch a lot. I know that, and I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about that. But we always start with an icebreaker. So my icebreaker is going to be really simple here. I just want to hear from both of you how you met or got to know Mayor Honea and the relationship that you've developed with him over the years. So we'll start over here with Lisa.
All right. Well, happy Friday, everyone. I have worked at the town now for over 27 years, and I did not know it when I first started here, but I learned very quickly that Mr. Mayor was my mailman. I lived out in his area that he delivered mail, and so then I obviously started noticing him. So he would always come into the office, chat with me, give me a little bit of a hard time about, my mail and everything. So that was a lot of fun. Through the years, it was always really nice because anytime he would have a conversation with me and introduce me to somebody new, he would always say, introduce me and say, this is Lisa Shafer. And I used to deliver her mail. So he would always say that to
every
everybody.
Single time, actually, whether you were present or not, if your name came up, he would say, I used to deliver her mail.
And he also used to throw in, she's been here for, a long time. She started when she was 17 years old. So that always made me feel good. It wasn't the truth, but I'm not sure if he believed it or if he was just making me feel good. So, and so that's always been wonderful. I enjoyed every bit of that 27 years working with him and just being his friend. And so it was really nice. A week and a half or so before we lost the mayor, we were at a retirement party, and I walked up, and the mayor's eyesight wasn't the greatest.
And he would remind you of that every time you saw him, even though you'd known him for 20 years, he would remind you that his eyesight was failing him.
Well, I came up on him, and I just, always try to get close enough so he knows who I am. And even from a distance, he said, "Oh, it's Lisa," and then immediately introduced me to the people and did the whole spiel again. So I got that, right at the end. So that's a great memory I have right at the end. So.
Very nice. All right, Brian, let's move over to you. Talk a little bit about how this relationship with Mayor Honea was forged.
Yes, sir. First, thank you for just inviting me to be on here.
Absolutely.
It's a privilege. Honored to talk about Mayor Honea. As you mentioned, I work for Northwest Fire District, and several years ago worked in our administration services. So I'd be involved with a lot of different entities throughout the town. Most people, I don't know how much people know this, but Northwest Fire essentially provides fire service for the vast majority of the town, if not almost the entirety of the town. And so as part of just building professional relationships, wanted to meet with other people. And the town being a huge partner with the Northwest Fire District, it was important to know the elected leader. So it started off just very professional, wanting to get to know the mayor, knowing how we could bridge those relationships. But the thing about Mayor Honea was, once you sat down and started talking to him, you were trapped. You were there. Everybody was a friend of the mayor, and you know what? It it was an honor to actually be able to meet with him over time. So what started off professionally just ended up turning into a friendship with him. And honestly, when we would meet moving forward, it was almost always more personal than it was business. Although, we would talk about things going on in the town, and I always appreciated his perspective. But the mayor was huge on relationships, and I know we're going to talk about that throughout the day today. But for him, he just loved having close relationships with people throughout the community. And as you mentioned, we went to lunch a lot. I think that helped. Anytime you want to take the mayor to lunch, you and I joked about this.
He loved people taking him to lunch, man.
Well, and we talked about it. As you said, his eyesight was getting bad, so he couldn't drive. And you can't contain the mayor just to his house by himself. He's got to be out with the people. And so I joked to you about this before. It was the mayor's Meals on Wheels program of who's picking him up and taking him to lunch that day. And you never had to worry. He was always going to be well fed. There was always someone who was happy to be in his company and take him out. And as you know, once you take him to lunch, you're also talking to everybody else in the restaurant because everybody's going to stop by and say hi and have something to say. So
yeah, you get to meet a lot of people in the community if you go to lunch with Mayor Ed Honea, because you're right. Everybody stops by the booth that you're sitting at and starts talking to them, and you get introduced to them. So yeah, and like Lisa, whenever Lisa's name would come up, the mayor always had like the same spiel about being your postman and about you starting with the town when you're 17. And with Brian, it was the same deal. You may not have known it or not, but every time your name came up, he had the same spiel and the same conversation when it came. Brian Keeley, I love that guy. I love that guy. I love Brian Keeley. I love that guy like a son. Like every time he would say that, and I'm like,
That's wonderful.
I kind of got a complex. I'd feel like a little jealous because he loved you so much.
I'm pretty sure you're not the first town manager who I had to say, I promise you, I'm not interfering with town business. I'm just going to buy him a hamburger and we're going to chat. We're good.
Yeah, I used to threaten Brad Bradley. You got to stop taking my mayor to lunch, man, because every time he meets with you guys, he comes back with some new idea that I've got to implement. So. Well, guys, I mentioned that we've been getting a lot of emails and comments on our website about the mayor. And some of these talk about, what kind of person he is, the things that resonated with them. And one of these that is, if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times. Mayor Ed Honea would say this, and this is coming from actually our very own Andrea de la Cruz. And she talks about how the mayor would always emphasize life is built on
relationships.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And like I said, if he said it once, he said it 1,000 times. And that was his mantra. And he put it out there all the time. And I'm just curious from both of your standpoints, any thoughts you have about how the mayor went about living that out in reality. Was that just a mantra that he said? Was it something that he lived out? What's your personal experience there in that regard?
I guess for me, it didn't matter. A lot of times with politics, which side of the coin are you on there? It didn't really, with the mayor, he truly hit. He reached across political party lines, and he was friends with so many people across the board. After his passing, I received condolences from some people in Pima County. One I deal with every once in a while. One I never even dealt with before, who was part of that organization, in that group, in that division, and just saying how important what he did for this community, for Pima County as a whole, was to them. So people that, like I said, I don't have a daily interaction with, were reaching out to me just to say how important he was, and he always took the time to, not just our residents. Like when he went out to eat, I would go and see him. Of course, I'd see him at Bisbee Breakfast Club a lot. I had my parents there. He would stop and talk to my parents, introduce them. My husband, he would reach out to him, and he just was a people person.
Yeah. Now, Brian, you finished my sentence. Life is built on
relationships.
Right. So I know that you've heard it. I know that you know it well. So, I mean, what always kind of precipitated him placing such emphasis on relationships and building relationships? And I think Lisa hit on something really well. You know, it didn't matter to him whether you were left or right, whether you were a D or an R. You know, and he would always, you know, I really like, and he's a Democrat. I really like him, and he's a Democrat. You know, right? So, talk a little bit, you know, about that from your perspective.
Well, he lived that motto completely. And after its passing, and you invited me on this podcast, I was trying to boil down one word that described Mayor Ed Honea, and I couldn't get to one, but I got to three.
Interesting.
And the three words were, he was humble, he was kind, and he was genuine.
Those are excellent descriptors.
And so relationships are everything. He was happy to have a relationship with everyone. When I talked to that humility, I mean, we go to the restaurant and I always laughed because some of the waitresses would give him such a hard time because he frequented the same spots. He knew everybody. And they'd sit there.
Knew him by name. Knew all the waitresses
and then
by name.
called him by
Yep.
Eddie.
Yep.
Eddie, don't you start today causing trouble in here. And he just laugh. He
And you had to love the laugh because the shoulders would come up and they'd start shaking.
He was living for that laugh. He was,
gosh, yeah.
He was going and get you out of you. So, but he was humble, but he was kind to everybody.
Yeah.
I never saw him come across anybody and it just not be a positive interaction, whether it was one of the first times he was meeting them or they've been lifelong friends. And I say genuine because that's who he really was. He wasn't putting on an act. It wasn't a show. This wasn't for, political favor, votes or anything. That's who he was to his core, and he wouldn't change it. He didn't change regardless of the room you were in or regardless of the company you were with. He just was who he was to his core, and that was being humble, kind, and genuine.
Yeah. Genuine, sincere, real, those are all things that I've heard repeatedly, and I can testify to all of those things. And, one of the things I've heard repeatedly in these messages as well as from other people, he always, when he interacted with you, I think, gave you the impression that he genuinely cared about you. And the reason that people got that impression is very simple, I think, because he really did care about you. When he asked about your kids, when he asked about your spouse, he would always ask about my wife. And then honest to goodness, he would tell the same story about my wife, about how my wife found him wandering around through the Costco parking lot looking for his car about a decade ago when he was still driving, and how she took the time to walk him through the parking lot until she found his car for him. And, he remembered those things, and he remembered things about your family and would ask about them consistently. And I think that is one of the things that, endeared him to so many people.
Well, I got in trouble one time with them because of my family. So I fill out all the paperwork for my kids' schools. And, it's the checkbox of, can we use photos? If a photo's taken of your kid, can we use it and plaster it on whatever we want? And I'm always conservative in nature. I'm like, no, you can't. So my wife would have clicked yes in a heartbeat, and I'm just that one who says no.
No.
So he was there. My youngest was at Marana Middle School, and he went to talk to a class, and at the end wanted a photo with the class. And so the teacher said, okay. He goes, but Mia, you can't be in the photo because it's going to get put out on social media, and your parents didn't give you permission. And he's like, what do you mean she doesn't have permission? And the teacher was like, I'm sorry, she doesn't. And he looked at my daughter and go, you tell your dad to call me when he gets home later. So I get home, my youngest just with all the sass in the world, was just like, you're in trouble with the mayor. You better give him a call. I was like, what happened? And she explained the whole thing. I was like, oh, I'm going to be in trouble. So I called him up. I was like, Mr. Mayor. He goes, why can't your daughter take a picture with me? And I was like, I just checked the box. No, I didn't think, like, never in a million years did I think when I checked that box that it was going to lead to this conversation throughout the year.
Right.
And he's like, I can't believe that there's a picture out there now and your daughter's not in it because you and I. So, I mean, he was giving me a hard time, but and he wouldn't let me hear the end of it. And
he loved giving people a hard time. I mean, he absolutely thrived on that. And, you know, he would do it, and he would do it with a big smile on his face. But just to make sure that you knew, he would always say, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You know that. You see me smiling, right?
But he took it too. You could give him a hard time back.
Yeah. Oh, in fact, we were driving around one time, and we were over by where the new Cal Portland SUP path was going through. And we came up to the gates there, and the gates were locked. And he said that he was walking there. He said, I came walking through here, and I just squeezed between the gates. And I looked at him and looked down at his belly, and I said, you did not squeeze between those gates. And he started laughing. His shoulders started going up and down. And he goes, well, I might have gone around him. So yeah, he could dish it out, but he could also take it. So absolutely, talking a little bit about the schools, those were always very near and dear to his heart. And he grew up here in Marana, went to schools throughout Marana, went to high school right here at what is now the middle school. And Brad Despain, who was a Marana legend of his own, talked about the fact that when he first got to know Mayor Ed Honea was in 1964, when Mayor Ed Honea was attending one of his ag classes at the high school, which again is now the middle school, and talked about what a great student he was, and going all the way back to high school, apparently, according to what Brad Despain wrote. He was a kind, caring, just a good young man. So it's not something he developed over time. It's who he was from a very young age, is what it sounds like. So, let me ask you this, because as a town manager, right, and I know that previous town managers like Mike Roussat and Gilbert Davison will probably testify to this. But as a town manager, every once in a while, you find yourself in the crosshairs of Mayor Ed Honea on an issue or two, right? Have you ever felt the ire of his displeasure with something that was going on that you maybe were involved with directly or indirectly?
I would say the biggest thing I knew I had to really step it up when we hit 50,000 for the town of Marana, because everybody knows that the mayor wanted us to do our own.
I know where you're going with this.
Yes, he wanted us to do our own CDBG, which is our Community Development Block Grant Program. And he waited and waited and waited for us to hit 50,000. And when that new census came out and we were at 50,000, he said, all right, let's go. And it's not an overnight process. It takes years to develop this. So it was quite the undertaking. And I'll bet he was extremely patient with you on that. Yeah, when I had to come and say, it's okay. We have to do this process, and we have to give notice, and we have to take it's a year to do this and a year to do that. A year, this is ridiculous. And then when I tell him, this is the amount of money I think we're going to get, well, that's ridiculous. We should be getting more. And I said, well, this is the federal government, and they pick it. Well, I don't understand how they're doing it. It's a formula. I don't care. We should be getting more. I'm going to call Casa Grande because they're getting more. All right. So it was, I felt really, I have to produce. I have to do good. It was a great process. We got through it. And so then I think he was happy. I think, we are offering a lot more to our residents, and that's what he wanted. So I'm proud to be able to give him that. So yes. I am that is what I'm most proud of, probably to produce for the mayor. Yeah,
and I knew you were going there with that, because that was something he. I will use the word in a kind context, but he would harp on me about that issue. And it was very important to him. And that was one of the things, when something was important to the mayor. And interestingly, when I say important to the mayor, it wasn't like a personal importance. It wasn't like he was somehow benefiting personally from CDBG, right? it's because he believed, he was passionate about this town, and he wanted the very best for it. And if he believed something was in the best interest of this town, he was on it like a dog on a bone, and he would not let go, right?
Agreed.
And sometimes he growled at me. So, Brian, you ever had that experience?
I feel like you're setting me up on this one, and I don't know that I even want to talk about it. I can't even look at you.
I'll give you my own story. I'll give you my own stories, but
so on 3 words that I don't think I'm even supposed to say in your presence, but we'll say Joint Dispatch Center.
Oh, that's right.
So
I forgot about that till just now.
Yeah. So for the audience, when Marana Police was building their beautiful new police headquarters, there was talk between Northwest Fire and Marana Police Department about forming a joint dispatch center. And I'm not going to get too deep in the past, but let's just say that my boss had just been named the new fire chief, but had not stepped into the role yet when he had to break the news to you, sir, that for funding reasons, we weren't going to be able to do that. And obviously you guys were about 98% of the way through construction of the new police headquarters. So you couldn't just throw in a new dispatch center at the last minute. So yeah, this was not a small thing. This was going to test some relationships real quick. And it did. And so I actually got summoned by the mayor, and I took the one and only scolding that I ever got from him. But I came prepared. I did, and you had to with Mayor Honea. I took the verbal lashing like we deserved on this one, and then I told him, I said, "Well, Mayor, there's nothing I can do about this. However, we are going to be building a new administration building, and we're thinking about putting it up on Marana Main Street, next door station up there. What do you think about that?"
Oh, that softened his heart. That softened his heart.
He turned in a heartbeat and was like, "That would be a wonderful idea." Because then you would have the town, and you'd have police, and you'd have fire, and Marana School District, and now it's becoming this, you have the health center, and it's becoming a hub for
Well, you did
downtown.
come prepared, buddy.
I came, and Chief Bradley and I talked about beforehand. I was like, I'm gonna have to lay this out there, and it's funny because now you go years down the road, it's, whose idea was it? He'll laugh at me, but you hear him tell that story. He's like, "Well, and I recommended that you build your admin." Talk to my boss. He's like, "Well, I came up with that." And I'm like, "I don't even care who gets the credit. I'm just glad I survived that day." But
Yeah, the scolding, the tongue lashing, I've had a few of those myself. And, I'll testify to the fact that when Mayor Ed is upset with you about something, there's no disguising it on his face.
no,
From the moment he walks into the office, I know I'm in trouble.
but to your point, it was never personal. It was never about him. It was never. It was you. But something has happened, and it's not good for the town.
Right.
And that was his focus all the time. And I'll tell you what, I've justifiably received a lot of tongue lashings in my life, and that was nothing. That one was easy to take because you knew you deserved it. And then you're like, well, but I mean, you love him, man. What are you going to do? He's going to be over it in a heartbeat and move on. So
Yeah, to your point, when we would have our tiffs, if you will, and we would either disagree or when I had failed him in some way, and that happened from time to time. And he would come into my office, and like I said, it was obvious that I was in trouble, and I didn't even have to guess. And I would just look at him and go, "Uh-oh, what did I do now?" And he would sit down in the chair, and he'd take his index finger on his right hand, and he would pound it on the desk and go, "I got a bone to pick with you." And I go, "Well, I kind of assumed that by the look on your face. What did I do?" And he would proceed to tell me what I had done or failed to do. And, we talked through it. And like you said, it was never personal, and it didn't affect in any way, shape, or form our relationship.
no,
If somehow, I failed him, or somehow we disagreed, and whatever the case may be, we would talk it out. Sometimes we'd even shout it out. And it was like at the end, we'd hug it out, and we'd be fine, and we'd go have lunch together, right? So
He played disappointed dad very, very well.
he did. Oh, that's a perfect way to put it, man. I don't know if he was always playing though. I think he was sometimes with me, anyways. He was definitely just flat out disappointed. But he played the disappointed dad thing.
But to your point, he never carried around a bag of rocks.
Nope, he did
not.
not.
The conversation, and when it was over, it was over.
Yeah, and I love that about him. I love that about him.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it endears. And I'll tell you this, too. I'm going to throw this out here, kind of along the same vein, along the same lines, is, I would go to meetings with him, and, you're in a room with a bunch of dignitaries and other mayors and, whatnot, and, if there was something being said that he didn't like, he was not bashful, right?
That is true.
He was not bashful about stating his position or talking about, that's not good for us and I'm not okay with that. And sometimes he would say things and I would go, oh, man, you can't say that. I'm sitting in the room or sitting next to him or, sitting in the back of the room. And I'm like, oh, man. But somehow he got away with it, man. People just listen to Ed Honea, and if it didn't come out, the most diplomatic way or the most politically correct way, for some reason it didn't matter with him, and people brushed that aside and just dealt with Ed as Ed and accepted, what he said, maybe not agreed with it, but accepted it because, again, going back, I think the main reason is because they always knew that behind that was his passion and care for this community. Agree?
100% agree.
Absolutely.
And that's that genuine nature.
Yeah.
I think everybody else saw that and it was like, well, that's who he is.
That's who he is.
Not going to change,
Right.
period. And we're okay with it because, again, they knew where it was coming from.
Yeah.
He wasn't he wasn't putting a rock in the bag and he was going to hold it against you. He was just going to say what he needed to say. And then you guys were just going to move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. So any other stories, thoughts that you have about Mayor Honea that you think are important for our listeners to hear about that you'd like to discuss here?
I have a funny story.
Oh, let's share. I want to hear funny stories.
Funny stories. And the mayor probably never even knew about this one. Honestly, when I started working at the town, and one of my neighbors in my area where I lived also worked for the town. She worked for HR. And she was on maternity leave, and she came back, and she would show people pictures of her new baby. And her new baby had red hair. And everybody would go, how does your baby have red hair? You don't have red hair. Your husband doesn't have red hair. Where'd the red hair come
I know
from?
where this is going.
And people would say, they started saying oh, that's the postman's baby. And she just about died because she knew who her postman was, right? And she would be no, it's really not the postman's baby. No, we don't say those things. It could be the milkman's baby or something like that. It's not the postman's baby. Don't be saying that. So
And you said she was in HR?
She was in HR.
So she's definitely you cannot, please don't.
Please
do not
don't.
say this. Yeah, so that was great. I don't know if anybody ever told the mayor he was being accused of anything, but yeah, so it was great though.
Oh, that is too funny. Funny.
He was humble, but we like to keep him humble as well. So going back to my youngest daughter, we were living up in North Marana in the Gladden Farms area, and she's 16 now. She was probably 8, 9 at the time, and she's like, she wanted ice cream, and there was no ice cream store out here, and she's like, Dad, you need to tell the mayor that we need an ice cream shop out here. And I said, well, the mayor can't just make an ice cream shop come out here. And with all the sass that she could easily muster, she's like, well, then what good is it being mayor? And I was like, well, all right, we're going to have to talk civics at some point. But I would share that story with him, and he laughed and laughed and laughed.
I can't believe that he has never. This is the first time I've ever heard that story.
Yeah,
and I'm shocked that it's the first time that I've ever heard that.
He
story.
would laugh at it, and I was like, so Obviously, I'm sad as passing because we have Dairy Queen and 31 Flavors being built right now.
Right now,
I fully intended to take my daughter to those ribbon cuttings with the mayor so she could look at him and say, well, about time.
About time. About time, yeah.
Well, he probably had something to do with Linda at R&R getting ice cream, I bet you.
Probably.
That's probably where the ice cream came from.
there
That's
you
probably
go.
the mayor telling her she
There
needed
you
to get
go.
ice cream.
Well, he was definitely looking forward to Dairy Queen and Baskin Robbins coming in. He talked about that all the time. He would ask me, "Where are they at? Where's the permits? Are we rushing that through? Are we giving them priority?" Because I mean, jokingly, obviously, but he really was looking forward to having that within walking distance of his house. You know, one of the things that also has come up repeatedly about the mayor, and you've talked about it, kind of the warmth of the mayor and the genuineness of the mayor, and Georgia Duncan and her husband, Don Duncan, who were, pillars in this community. George is still here. Don passed away a couple years ago now, I guess, a year and a half ago. And she wrote about the fact that Mayor Ed always had a hug for the ladies and a firm handshake for the men. And that was absolutely true, man. If he knew you, he only had to know you for about 5 minutes, and he would give you a hug if you were a lady. And if you were a man, he'd extend the hand, put his hand out on your shoulder, and give you a firm handshake and a shoulder grab and a warm smile. I mean, and that was with everybody. It was with everybody.
Absolutely, everybody.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it really didn't matter, and I think that those are some of those intangible things that people, forget about, don't think about. And there was a letter here, and from a gentleman who was in the broadcast business, Michael Cooper, and Michael Cooper talked about in 2015 when he first moved to the town with KOLD. He needed a comment from somebody from the town about a story that he was doing. He couldn't remember what the story was, but he talked to Dan Maris and said, hey, I need a comment. And Dan said, well, just call the mayor. He was like, call the mayor? He said, yeah, here's his number, right? And he's like, really? I can just call the mayor? And he's like, yeah. He calls him on his cell phone, right? And he says, not only did the mayor take my call and actually answer the phone, but he sat on the phone with me for an hour, answering my question and then talking to me about my family, how I ended up here, talked about the town of Marana. And, you just don't get that. I mean, Mayberry, USA, people think it doesn't exist, but it existed with Mayor Ed Honea in Marana, Arizona.
He was a politician.
Yeah.
But it feels awkward calling him a politician because I've never met another one like him.
Yeah.
He just had a vision for what he thought the town should be, and it was focused on families and, safety and good roads and cleanliness, like all the things, parks. Things
Oh my
people
gosh,
value.
parks. He was so passionate about parks.
And he fought developers to make sure that they would include open spaces, that they would put in parks so that the children, had somewhere close by to play. He didn't want this to be a concrete jungle. So everything he did was to fight for this town, but he just believed this is my vision. I'm going to fight for it. And if the people like it, then they'll elect me. And if they don't, then they won't. And that's okay. And that was that humility piece to it. He wasn't going to tell you something because he wanted your vote. He was going to tell you what he believed. And if you believed in it with him,
great,
you would support him.
Yep.
And if not, okay.
He was okay with that too.
And I mean, he's run unopposed as mayor. I don't know how many times. He's been on the council forever. In his passing, when you think about the political season we just went through, which has been chaotic, I was scouring social media just looking at the comments because I was like, nobody better dare. But there just wasn't a negative comment there at all.
From anybody.
Yeah. And, this is a man who had just, again, got his another term unopposed. Nobody was going to run against him. And it just speaks volumes that him just being true and being himself and laying it all out there and said, if you like it, I'm here and I'll fight for it. And if you don't, let me know. And that's okay. Bring bring in someone who meets your ideals. But I can't think of him like a politician, even though he was.
Right. And, I think that's an excellent point, Brian. Anybody who serves in politics for any amount of time, and there's going to be people, the enemies that you get and have, and people that are going to have negative things about negative things to say about you. And that just isn't the case with Mayor Ed Honea. And I think that's a testament to how he stayed true to himself, stayed true to his values, stayed true to what he believed was in the best interest of the town. And you mentioned developers, and I have one here from a developer. His name's Dean Wingert. And Dean has been developing here in the town of Marana for a long time, 27 years apparently, it says. And he talks about the mayor, and he says, you might think that our roles would create a contentious relationship, and you're right. At first, we often found ourselves at odds over issues of one kind or another, but it didn't take too long to see that Ed's position always came from a place of pride, not self-pride, but an extremely strong pride in what Marana was and what it could become. I came to greatly respect Ed, and I would like to think that he saw that he could trust me as our relationship became friendly. Ed's desire to improve Marana day by day couldn't help but affect you. And I found that to be absolutely so true. His passion for Marana was infectious. It was contagious. And, here you have a developer that saw that too. And here's what I really like about what Dean writes. He said, Ed's desire to improve Marana day by day couldn't help but affect you, and I realized that as my company planned and created new neighborhoods within the town, I have often thought, I hope Ed likes this. I absolutely love that such passion for this community that you have, that even developers are thinking, I really hope the mayor appreciates what we're doing and likes what we're doing here. And they gave thought to when they were doing the development, when they're doing the park, when they're putting amenities in the park. And they would often call him and say, Ed, what would you like to see in this park? Right? And he would let him know, I want to see at least this, and this. And if you can do these things too, that would be great. Right?
Mr. Wingert has developed some beautiful neighborhoods in Marana. Yeah. And they are full of wonderful parks and open spaces and trees and grass and all those things that Mayor Honea insisted be a part of this town as it developed. You only get one chance to develop a town, and Marana has grown so quickly, and his focus was making sure we get this right the first time, because it's our one chance.
Absolutely.
I think one of his, for me, I worked in planning for 14 years, and one of the big things the mayor did not like was small lots. Did not like small lots. So if you went lower than 6,000 square feet per lot, it was going to be a challenge. So I know Dean, I was the planner that did a lot of the Gladden stuff, and they try anything small lots. I'm like, we got to go before council on this. We got to go before the mayor. The mayor's going to give you a hard time if you're trying to do anything below 6,000 square feet. And so I think that over the years, the mayor did soften
on that.
It took a long time to get the mayor to see some of the benefits to having different types. But that was a challenge for many, many years with him. So, but it was great. He had a vision, and that's what he wanted to see. And yes, he loved his parks. I worked also in the parks department. I worked all over, but and he loved to walk. We know he liked to take walks every night. And our parks crew would say it was great. He'd come over there almost probably every night, walking from his house to Ormayharn Park, visit with the staff, visit with the people at the park. He was great and enjoyed our parks and enjoyed our residents. So.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate, Brian, you coming on the show with us, Lisa being with us once again, sharing a little bit about your own personal interactions and relationships with Mayor Ed Honea. And I know that we could probably go on all afternoon talking and sharing different stories and whatnot. But we only have so much time here. And I hope that this has given the residents of our community a little bit of an insight into the man, Mayor Ed Honea, Eddie Ray. And Eddie Ray Honea is going to be memorialized and celebrated here in just a few days, and we hope that you'll join us 1:00 right here at the newly renamed Ed Honea Municipal Complex. And we're really excited about the new naming. We're excited about being able to celebrate Mayor Ed Honea. He was actually on the show once. We had him on here, and that was back in March of 23, where he talked about history. And so if you want to hear Ed talk about the town and get a flavor for his passion for this community and his knowledge and understanding of its history and the importance of that history in shaping and forming who we are today, you can certainly go back in the archives and listen to that March of 2023. So thank you so much, listeners, for joining us. Thank you again, Brian and Lisa, for joining us as well and helping us out. Until next time. Submit your questions by visiting maranaaz.gov/realtalk, and we'll answer them right here. To receive notifications for new releases, remember to hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, remember to follow the town on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on current news and events.